Hi, Rabbi Moshe. Just want to check and make sure you see our screensaver here. Rabbi, what's going on?
I see it.
Okay, amazing. We are now live. We're streaming live to Facebook and to YouTube. And we're getting ready for this wonderful event. We're going to go ahead and let everybody into the Zoom chat room. We're going to do that now. Welcome, everybody. We're going to be starting in just a couple minutes. Welcome, everybody who's joining. Please come on in, take a seat, get comfortable. We will be starting in just a few minutes. Once again, welcome everybody. It's 5:58. We're scheduled to start in just 2 minutes. We have a nice crowd coming to join us today, which is wonderful. And we will start in just a few minutes. Get comfortable, relax, take it easy. Yeah. Get ready for an interesting Zoom event. I see Jaden and Jamie Ben Lolo are joining us from our JYN Academy class, which is fantastic. I see someone says family iPhone. We don't know who that is. You feel free to rename yourself if you want to let us know who you are. And one of our other ambassadors, Emily Cohen, has just entered the house, which is fantastic. Lots of people joining us. Bruria, if you are there and I don't see you, please make yourself known so we could unmute you. So welcome everybody. We're going to get started in just a few moments. Okay. Okay, so we're just about ready to get started. We still have lots of people coming in. We have about half our crowd now. So we'll just wait 1 or 2 more minutes for everybody to join us. We are streaming this. People are still trying to register now. It's a little late, but that's okay. We are streaming this to Facebook and to our YouTube for others to watch live now or later if they'd like. Hi, Jaden. I see you say hi to everybody in the chat. Chat is working. Thank you. Bruria, if you could rename yourself so I could see you and I could co-host you, that would be great. Okay, got it. Afion. Okay, we got Bruria here all the way from Israel, which is amazing. Okay, we are almost ready to start. 6:02, a little bit late. We've got a lot. I'll tell you, we actually had lots of questions come our way, and wow, there is just absolutely so much to talk about. So many questions. And listen, people, please let us know your feedback after. We could always do another one of these, and we could do another one after that. So, as I mentioned, we are sharing to our Facebook, facebook.com/Jewish Youth. And we are now live. We are going to stop sharing and we are going to get ready to start the program. Okay. And I'm going to spotlight our speakers for today. Give me 1 minute here. Get everybody all set up. Lots of people still joining us now, which is wonderful. We are just about going to start. Just want to find Bruya here so I could put her on the spotlight. Okay, we're going to get started. There we go. Okay, wonderful. Okay, we are ready. We are ready to get started. And we are live. We are starting this wonderful Zoom. Thank you everybody for joining us. We're still letting people in, but it's 6:04 and the time is now. So let's start the program. Thank you all for joining us for this special event. I want to thank Sanchia for actually inspiring me to do this. We've had various different Zoom events for different topics, and really this is something that is needed more than ever. So thank you for the inspiration, and whenever there's a good idea, please bring it forward and let us know, so we could we could definitely bring out some good content to everybody. So today we're going to address some of the questions that have been brought to us as rabbis, and we'll introduce everybody. But before I get into that, I want to mention really what the focus of today's event. We could always have another event with other focuses. For the young people, it's been an interesting challenge to see what's going on, which you'll hear from Donnie in just a moment, to feel it in social media, and to experience it firsthand, even outside of Israel, to some level. There's different types of experiences. This is something new for many, many young people in our community and around the world. This is not something they've actually experienced before, even though those who are a bit older and even older than myself know that the conflict which is going on in and around Israel is not something new, and the strife that the Jewish people have been through throughout the ages is also not something new. But nonetheless, it's been relatively calm, if you will, for quite a little bit, at least not in the news and not out there. And all of a sudden, with the exasperation of social media, oh my goodness, the world has exploded. And really, that's true on so many other levels as well, not just in relation to Israel. But our focus is really that. And the question is, as the young Jewish people, as seeing what's going on in the streets, seeing so much out there, how do you digest it all? How do you respond to it? How do we understand it? What is an approach? What's a healthy approach? How do we ask questions? Who do we ask questions to? And we actually got probably about 40, 50 questions, which we're not going to be able to tackle all today, but we tried to put them all together, as many as we can, and go through some. I'd like to introduce our Emcee for today. Our Emcee is Donnie Mareski, as you can see. You guys are all on mute, so you could just give a wave or a thumbs up. Donnie's great. She's one of our JYN ambassadors. She's been involved in JYN since grade 9. I hope I'm not stealing your speech, Donnie. And she's in our grade 12. And she's also, from the day that sort of this whole thing began, she's been in touch with me, and I'm sure with many others, about what could we do? How can we take action? How can we help? And it's really amazing. She's been through some of her own interesting experiences, which she'll talk about, but I just want to commend her for taking the time as a young person, not just to listen and take advice, which we all need to do, but to be on this platform and to be live on social media now, for the benefit of the Jewish people, to hear what you have to say, to introduce other rabbis, to hear what they have to say, to introduce Bruria, who's in Israel in Beersheba now, and hear what she has to say, so we could all have that conversation and get educated. So Dani, kol hakavod, as they say in Hebrew, and I'm turning it over to you for now.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Dani Moreski. I'm glad to be your host tonight. Shmuley stole my thunder, but yep, I've been here since grade 9, and this is my second year as a JY and ambassador. Being so involved in the Jewish community, it is great to see all of you here wanting to further your knowledge and get a clear understanding about the balagan that's happening between Israel and Palestine, and also, frankly, worldwide due to social media. As a teenager, I'm pretty involved in social media. There's no denying that. I recently posted a TikTok of me and my dad waving an Israeli flag, and the amount of hateful comments I've received, to be honest, it's not shocking, but it's very unfortunate. Luckily, I'm thick-skinned, so I know how to take it, but the way the media has displayed Israel puts me at a loss for words. I guess that's why we're all here today, to learn how to still stay strong and stand with Israel and understand it all. It's time to get real, introspect, change the narrative, and ask ourselves and our speakers tonight the real tough questions. Why do they, in fact, hate us this much? For countless of centuries, Jews have been targeted and been mistreated. So I want to ask you, Shmuley, how should one deal with anti-Semitism? Why is Israel held to a standard that no other state is held to?
So that's a great question, and it's a great way to dive right into things. Anti-Semitism and how to deal with it and how Israel's responding. So I want to take just a step back real quick and give a little perspective on anti-Semitism. Quick perspective is like this. We just celebrated Shavuot, 3,333 years ago. We received the Torah. And I just want to, I'm not going to bore you with Hebrew school all over again, but I want to recap what actually happened in a way that we could all relate to in a practical sense, in a very real scenario. Parents are going on vacation. COVID's over, God willing, very soon, and the parents are going on vacation. They had enough. And they have a bunch of kids at home. And they turn to the eldest, they turn to Dani, and they say, Dani, listen, we're going to go on a little vacation. We need some time. And, 3 kids, 4 kids at home. You're the eldest. I want you to look after everybody. And there's no parties in the house. And you say, sure, mom, dad, whatever you want. That's fine. Go ahead and enjoy yourselves. I'll take that responsibility on. No worries. I'll make sure everybody's safe. In the meantime, the moment they leave, everybody wants to throw a party. You know how it is. Everybody wants to throw a party, them and their friends. And each one of your siblings is looking at you, Dani, come on, seriously? And they don't like it. Frankly, they don't like it. And you're now stuck in a little bit of a situation. And the situation for you is, on the one hand, you also like to party. And you know how much they would enjoy their party. But at the same time, you're tasked with the responsibility. And it's a responsibility that you didn't actually ask for, frankly. And maybe if you would have had an option, maybe you would have taken it, or maybe you wouldn't have. But that's a discussion which is irrelevant right now. The reality is that that task has been tasked of you by your parents. And in respect and in awe and in love of your parents, you stand your ground. And you say no to your siblings. And they despise you for it. Oh, you goody goody, oh, you this, oh, you all the things that they could throw at you. They may even bully you. They may push you around. And you're doing the right thing. The right thing is this is what your parents asked you to do. And when we received the Torah, essentially what happened there is God has asked the Jewish people to be, in Hebrew, or Lagoyim, which means a light unto the nations. And what that means is we're not here to lecture anybody or tell anybody what to do. We need to live our lives in the way that God told us. And when we do that, which is what we need to do, whether we like it or not, whether we're comfortable with it or not, whether we asked for it or not. This is what God commanded us to do and told us to do. And some people look at that and admire that and are in awe of that and say, wow, that's something I could look up to, and that's something I could learn from, which is really what the goal is. And we could share the word of God, and we could talk about a greater spiritual reality with the world. And some will despise us. So this is a task that we've had for 3,333 years, and it has not been an easy job, that's for sure. But one thing I can tell you, though, a very interesting thing that strikes me about anti-Semitism, which we've seen in so many different forms, is that if you put it simply, what is the difference between anti-Semitism and hate? Good old hate that you see in school, that you see amongst people, just regular hate, because there's a lot of hate out there. The difference is when you say you don't like something, you dislike someone, you dislike something. If you say to me, Shmuley, I don't like your shirt. Okay, I could respect that. Either I say, okay, guess what, Danny? I'm going to go out and buy another shirt. And guess what? The problem is gone. It's gone. There's no purpose for the hate anymore, because all you really disliked and hated was a particular thing. And if you remove that thing, then the hate is gone. There's a unique factor in anti-Semitism, and that is the irrationality of it. There is no rationale. And if you look throughout history, there's nothing that if you would take that away, it would go away. And that boggles the mind, because it's not hate that's actually built on something that you did, which I don't like. There is this perpetual hate or perpetual anti-Semitism, if you will, that we find throughout history that has come up in different forms to the Jewish people. It wasn't, Israel and Gaza, if you will, in the 1930s. It was something else. And we're not going to give a full history lesson, but if you go throughout history, you'll see it was always something else. There was always something, and it was always pinned to that. And I always wonder, if you take Israel out of the equation, would anti-Semitism disappear today? I wonder. But just to finish off with your last point about why is Israel, or how is Israel held to a certain higher standard than other people? The truth is, they're not held to any standard. It's a crazy world out there. And every country, you look around the world where people are dying and where people are suffering and where there's strife and where there's wars. There's a lot of places in the world that are very, very full of difficult situations going on. No question about it, on various different levels. It's not that we're being held to a certain regard. The media's bias, that's another discussion. I think you have a question on that. But we, as the Jewish people, as the Jewish nation, whether it's the Israeli Defense Force, whether it's the people in the country, the people living there, everybody and around the world, as the Jewish people, we believe in God. And if we believe in God and we have a Torah that gives us morals and values, then we hold ourselves to a high standard on every level. And when it comes to a situation where you're defending one and have to hurt another, forget what the world says, whether they like us or not. You know what? Honestly, it doesn't even matter, because that's a discussion of its own. And we'll get to that. But for myself, I want to do the right thing. And that is a Jewish approach throughout everything we do, and something that we can learn from in everything we do. What is the right thing for me to do right now? Because I want to do the right thing. That is the standard that we hold ourselves to because of the type of people that we are. And this is a truth and a higher level of relationship with God that is embedded in the soul and the neshama of the Jewish nation. That doesn't mean we're perfect. We make mistakes. We all make mistakes. But in our relationship with God, and our relationship with the world, in doing chesed and helping others, we hold ourselves to a higher standard. So it's not a surprise that Israel will do everything they can in every way possible to hold themselves to the best standard a human can possibly hold themselves to. I don't think it's so much about what the world says, because if we have to worry about what the world says about us, we have a lot bigger issues. But I do believe you're right. I do believe that is a core value, a core Jewish value. I hope I answered those questions, but I'll put it back to you, Danny.
Couldn't have said it better. Thank you, Shmuley. This takes me to my next question for you, Moishi. When you see these anti-Semitic attacks around the world, What can a Jewish person do to help fellow Jews during these difficult times? How do we not feel despair? You are on mute.
Oh,
It's not a Zoom meeting until somebody says you're muted. Thank you very much, Dani. Thank you to Bruria for joining us, and thank you for writing that post that gave a lot of people here a lot of strength and a lot of encouragement. First of all, I want to start backwards. How do we not feel despair? I don't know. I think there's a lot to feel despair about, and that's probably the first reaction. It's overwhelming and it's crushing. To deny that, to try to pretend that it's not depressing and despair-inducing would be a lie. I think you have to let yourself go through that. But we don't stop there, right? Half of the book of Tehillim, half the book of Psalms is King David going through his emotions. He's a very vulnerable, in a very healthy way, emotionally vulnerable person. So I don't think we have to have a goal of not feeling despair. We have to have a goal maybe of not getting stuck in despair, which is a whole nother story. What to do to help fellow Jews during these difficult times? I think there's a couple of things. First of all, on a practical level, we're going to talk more later about something practical we can do right now in this situation. But you know, there's always a way to reach out directly to someone who's been a victim of some kind of incident, whether it was online, verbal harassment, or God forbid, something in person, or even to people who are living under fire in Israel. And sometimes just reaching out directly to someone instead of just leaving it lost in the ether is a very powerful thing for them and for you as well, to connect with the people who are suffering and offer your support and offer your encouragement. It does something for both of you. You know, during the Holocaust, during the years of persecution under communism, Jews in Europe had a code word, which if you ever bumped into somebody late at night, you weren't quite sure which side they're on. Are they friend or foe? The code word was Amcha. Amcha means your nation, and it's a word that's used in the prayers in the Torah hundreds of times in referring to the Jewish people as God's nation, your God's nation, Amcha. You bump into somebody late at night, you say Amcha, and they say Amcha, you're good. All we have is each other, really. I think this is a lesson, like Shmuley said, that the young generation might be learning for the first time. It's true that we have friends around the world, but ultimately in a time of crisis, you can't count on anybody more than you can count on your fellow brothers and sisters, your fellow Jews. And we are the Amcha to each other, and we have to be there for each other practically. And another thing we can do for each other is spiritually, because we do believe that everything in this world is a manifestation of something spiritual. It doesn't just start at the physical level. That's like the most superficial perspective on life. And everything starts off somewhere spiritual. And if there's a dysfunction at the physical level, there's a dysfunction at the spiritual level. And if we can repair things at the core level, it has an effect at the physical level. And so anything we can do to strengthen our spiritual health, which is which strengthens the collective spiritual health of the Jewish people, is going to have an effect on everything on the ground, which is really the principle at the root of the Rebbe's campaign for men to put on tefillin, which began just before the 6-Day War. And it was literally, arms for Israel, no pun intended, but you putting on tefillin in Toronto or Waterloo or wherever you are, or any mitzvah, contributes additional spiritual firepower to the spiritual source and root of the Jewish people, and that's manifested in physical strength and physical security. I just want to just finish that point by saying I saw a very, very powerful picture illustrating this principle of how we're all there for each other. And if we are there for each other, that's really all we need. One of the shuls that was terrorized and burned in Israel had a marathon 24-hour rebuilding. Literally the night or the day after it was torched, and everybody volunteered and everybody came with their tools and supplies, and they literally rebuilt the shul overnight. And nothing besides for the defiance, there's nothing just like, guys, to our enemies of the world, we really don't care what you do to us. We're just coming back. But the togetherness and the unity and the support that that we're always going to be able to rely on each other, it's the best insurance policy. So we have to be that for each other, practically, spiritually, in every way we can. And that's really a way to not get stuck in despair, but to really be able to move forward. I think that's really important.
Thank you. I know, Shmuley, you've always mentored us, especially your students, to be proud Jews and never disguise who you are. But now, do you recommend men to wear baseball hats to cover their kippas? People take off their Jewish necklaces. Do you recommend covering our mezuzahs until things calm down?
Donnie, that's a very good question. I also want to take a quick minute just to mention that we're going to be hearing from Bruria Afyun, who's in Israel right now in Beersheba. God willing, there'll be no rockets. So just so everybody realizes, she's part of our panel. She'll be answering a bunch of questions shortly. I want to welcome her, didn't formally do that, and also Rabbi Goldman, who is the Chabad rabbi at the University of Waterloo and Laurier. And there's been a lot of talk about what's going on over there as well. So we're sort of coming together from various different angles. But to your question, Donnie, I got that question email. Really, it's almost a hard question to hear. It's like we talk about never again, and we talk about being a proud Jewish person, being able to be, we live in a free country, and being able to celebrate our Jewish identity. So many courses and lectures on that, and here we're presented with this question. Before we even get to the answer, the fact that we're asking this question, it hurts. It really does, and it's concerning on so many levels that we even have to think about such a question. Not that the question is not valid. The question is so valid that it's a deep question. It reminds me of a quick story I just want to share with you. You can't have a bunch of rabbis answering and talking and Rebbitzins and not share a story. It doesn't work that way. But I'll keep it short because we want to move along and answer questions. But I think this is sort of what comes to mind. So by my bubby's funeral, which was in Detroit, my bubby Greenwald. So the rabbi there shared a story, which I never knew. And I just want to share the brief end of the story. I might have shared it with some of my classes. So my bubby's grandfather lived in Latvia, and his name was Mantel Schulman. And he was a chassid. And I'm not sure exactly which chassidus he belonged to. We still need to look that up and look up all the details of the story. But he was one of these underground teachers of Torah when it was illegal to study Torah. And often when I teach my classes, Donna, you might have heard it from me. I actually introduced with this story because I reflect on it for a quick minute, that in Canada, we don't have those challenges. In Canada, I could go into JYN and I could teach as much Torah as I want. And I could talk to as many students that I want to, that are willing to come and study Torah. We could put on tefillin, we could do whatever mitzvahs we want. We're free. We have that ability. God bless Canada. God bless, the world we live in. And we've said this many, many times. And we're so happy. And we're happy for all religions that have that freedom of religion. It's something we should never take for granted. So my bubby's grandfather, they had also Torah classes, and the way it worked was they had small classes underground, and because it was illegal to teach Torah, and it was illegal for him to teach Torah. It was not allowed, and the anti-Semitism at that time was at a peak, at a very high level. So the kids, the little students that would come to class, would all have to walk different ways to get to the class. It would be underground with no windows. And 5, 6, 7 students would come around, and my grandmother's grandfather, so my great-great-grandfather, he was one of those teachers. And it so happened that the authorities, the communists, they followed him, or one of the students, to the class and found him teaching Torah, and they beheaded him in front of his class. And that's how he died. But the classes continued. And we're here, and I reflect upon that here it is 100 years later, 100 and some years later, more than that, I'm teaching Torah, and I'm continuing that legacy. So the answer really is, we're talking about our identity. This is who we are. It's a very ancient history. It's a rich history that we're very proud of. Imagine, and I'll just use terminology that we can relate to. Imagine somebody would ask or tell Black people to hide their Blackness in today's world. Or imagine that we told Asians to hide who they are because of haters on them. Or for that matter, any religion, or for that matter, any race. Imagine we told them, or anyone told them, that's the message for you guys right now, to hide who you are, or change who you are, or block out who you are, versus celebrating your identity in a way that you can be proud and happy. We live in a world today where we push that ideology of people celebrating who they are and really acknowledging and accepting all people, all kinds of people in today's world on so many levels, on every level, with the idea of getting rid of racism and getting rid of all types of judgment of any type of accepting all religions and accepting all people for who they are. So for us to think for a moment that Jews are an exception to that, it hurts to even consider that. Why? If anything, we should celebrate. And if there are a minority that are being picked on, people should come along and support us like they do other minorities or other situations that are going on around the world. I will say the one thing, that those who hate and bring those feelings upon us, where they go around the streets and they make these awful demonstrations, which are not an idea of freedom of expression. Sure, everybody could express their opinion. I'm all for that. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, or, we all have to tolerate opinions, 100%. But to inflict fear that a Jewish young person should be concerned about wearing a kippah in the street, that comes from a place of lack of faith. That's how I understand it. Because think about it for a second. If you believe in God, and God created all kinds of people with all kinds of religions, with all kinds of perspectives, and you believe in that God that did that, then who are you to judge God's work in any way? Really? Believing in God is a powerful tool to eradicate any hate in any shape or form to anyone. How could we hate anyone that God created? Who are we? Are we smarter or wiser than God? So a world devoid of God is a world with a lot of strife, because what you have is clashing opinions, and you have everybody who's smarter, who's better, who's this, who's that, and it goes on and it never ends. But I actually believe very strongly that if you could introduce God into the picture, into the conversation, then call God what you want, whatever name you want to refer to under your religion. But the concept of a creator, a monotheistic God, one God in this world, then God put us all here and put us in our families and in our religions of who we are. So the answer to the question, just to come back to the answer, is I don't believe in any way, shape, or form anyone should hide any part of their Jewish identity. We should wear them strong, not because we want to show it to someone else, not because we need to put it in someone's face. It's because we need to be proud and strong of who we are. And the stronger that we are in our role as the Jewish people for ourselves, is the more we're respected. We are feeling the arrows come at us, so to speak. We are feeling that hate at us. It's to deny that would be oblivious to the reality. But be strong and know that there are strong people around you. We're a strong nation, and we've never, ever cowered to bullies as a Jewish nation. That doesn't mean it was always easy for us, but this is something that we really need to do, and we really need to remember that in times like these, when you hear the types of language that people are saying, these are not demonstrators for a solution. How can we, help bring minds together? Those ideas are ideas. When you hear the words, and I don't even want to repeat the types of words that were screamed, I'm sure many have seen them on social media from various demonstrations in England and other places about our daughters and about this, that. What we have to know is that this is intimidation. Really think of it, what you see in the school with bullying, it's the same thing. And how do we treat that? We treat it with strength. That's the only way. And that is the solution, and history has proven that that is the solution for the Jewish people.
All right, thank you. Bruria, you're living through this firsthand. We're on the outskirts just witnessing, and a lot of Jews have mixed emotions right now: anxiety, fear, anger, sadness, and frustration. Briefly, how do we harness these emotions? Like, what are your coping mechanisms? Obviously, going to be a little different here, but how do we use these feelings for the greater good and to be stronger?
It's a great question. First of all, thanks for having me. And I mean, you might be far, but it seems like you guys are also having some very big challenges right now in Canada. I'll share with a story, my first experience here. We moved to Israel in 2014 to Beersheba, where my mother was actually born here. And shortly after I gave birth to my second child, I think like a couple weeks later with a tiny newborn. So about 3 months into living in Israel, I had a tiny newborn. Things were going great. We love Beersheba, amazing community. We loved moving in. We were welcomed so warmly. It was Shabbat afternoon. My husband was in shul, and I was feeding my toddler and holding my newborn. And suddenly a siren rang. And that was my very, very first siren in Israel. Your first siren in Israel is absolutely terrifying. Your first siren being alone with a baby and a toddler, very hard to put words to that. So I quickly grabbed my toddler in one hand, baby in the other, ran to our staircase, because if you can't get down all the way to the bottom floor to the bomb shelter fast enough, you go to the staircase, where you meet all your neighbors, often wrapped in towels with bubbles in their hair if they were just showering or whatever everyone was in the middle of doing. My heart was absolutely racing, but my toddler didn't understand what was happening, and I knew this is her first siren. If she sees that I am scared, this is going to be very hard for her. So I had to keep calm the entire time. Took them back inside, finished feeding them. My husband came home. Thankfully, he was very close by. Put them to sleep, and then like shattered. Like your heart just races, it pounds. You need to like catch it. Takes a moment. The siren gives you a major adrenaline rush. And then there's like a moment of confusion, so many emotions, anxiety, fear. What's going to happen now? What's going on? Is there a war breaking out? Why are we getting a siren? And that was the beginning of Operation Protective Edge, which was pretty long, almost 3 months. A lot of sirens in Beersheba, a lot of hanging out with our neighbors in the staircase. And the first few days of it, I wasn't feeling great, to be honest. I was feeling all those emotions you were saying: anxious, nervous, afraid, angry, what's going on? Helpless, very helpless. Checking the news constantly, which doesn't really help. And then one day, a friend of a friend contacted me and told me that her husband was called up for reserve duty to Beersheba as part of Homefront Command. And what Homefront Command does when they're in a city is their job is to go around every time there is a rocket over the city. After it falls, they go around to see if there's damage, to pick up the pieces, to make sure everyone's okay. They also go check that all the bomb shelters are secure and safe. They bring food to people that aren't able to go out and get food to themselves, particularly the elderly who end up being stuck inside for months at a time. So her husband was on reserve duty in Beersheba, sleeping on the floors of classrooms. And for some reason, due to logistic issues, they were being fed terrible food, like canned cold food that's meant to be heated up but not, and they were starving hungry. And these are not, maybe young soldiers that are in practice can handle that, but these were older men that were called up on reserve duty that had been married for several years, that are used to eating proper food every day. And this was just not great for them. So this friend of a friend asked me, do you know where I can get food for my husband right now? And the answer was no, I don't, because things are mostly closed right now. But we can cook up a meal and bring it to him. He happened to be about a 20-minute walk away. So that day we cooked up a pretty large meal and brought it over for 10, 15 soldiers that were over there sleeping in that classroom. And they appreciated it so much. They were like, okay, we have to do this every day. We're going to bring them food for breakfast and we're going to bring them supper. I told some of my friends and they joined in. We took turns. Each of us had a different day to deliver the food. There was nothing more terrifying than when my husband went to deliver. And I was so worried the whole time, what if there's a siren while he's walking and there's no shelter for him to go to? One day I posted on a cooking Facebook group, I need more ideas of meals that I can cook for large amounts of people that if a siren goes off in the middle and I have to leave it for 10, 30 minutes at a time, it's not going to burn. And I got a ton of answers, but mostly very, very concerned people saying, why are you asking questions? And then suddenly from around the world, these people in this Facebook group, they were saying, we want to join in. Can we send you money to sponsor these meals? So what originally started as us bringing one meal to some soldiers turned into a few months of every day taking turns with friends, cooking huge meals, delivering it to them, people all over the world sponsoring them. At one point, we ended up with a little bit too much money, a lot too much money. A cousin was a commander leading inside of Gaza. And because their group was put together really, really fast, they didn't have the proper equipment they needed and it wasn't in the budget. They weren't able to get it. So we used a lot of the extra money to buy equipment for them. So next thing you know, this isn't just an operation of making meals, we're funding and purchasing equipment for soldiers. And suddenly everything changed. I went from feeling anxious, feeling afraid, feeling like a victim, to feeling like, hey, I'm part of the solution. I'm helping out here. I'm doing something. And that shift was really, really everything. It's you're going to experience emotions, and you definitely need to listen to your emotions. It's good to listen to your emotions, hear them out, talk about them with friends. Don't shove them under a rug because they grow under the rug. Hear them out, but then remember that you have a choice. You can experience these emotions as a victim, or you can experience them as ambition and as motivation to do really good things. It's a choice that you have at every single moment. You can let your emotions pull you down to a very dark place. And I won't blame you if you do that. It's hard. It's really hard. Or you can say, okay, I'm going to listen to my emotions. I'm a person. I'm a human. It's normal to feel this. These feelings are here for a reason, but I'm going to use them as fuel to do good things. And then later, when the whole thing is over and you get through it, instead of remembering it as a traumatic time, you end up remembering it as a time where, wow, I did an amazing thing together with my friends. We fed soldiers, we kept them strong, we kept them motivated. We armed soldiers in a really important mission, soldiers that were literally walking around in Gaza having explosions right and left. We helped them. So now I can look back at that time. It wasn't my traumatic first war in Israel. It was my first experience protecting Israel and making our country stronger. And that in turn made me and my friends and everyone involved into stronger people.
Thank you for sharing. With that being said, Moishi, do you recommend teens to advocate their Judaism during these trying times?
That was amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. Do I recommend teens advocating or announcing their Judaism during these times? Like Shmuley said, I completely agree that if we're going to be silent, it only gives our enemies and our detractors more time at the mic, so to speak. And anyway, you can't hide. Jews are Jews. And there's nothing really to hide. Something the Rebbe wrote to a person who was going through very difficult times really stuck with me. And I think it wasn't really about this, but I think it applies to this as well. The person was going through a lot of opposition. It wasn't really life and death, not like this is, but he was very stressed out from all the opposition. And the Rebbe wrote to him that your enemy's power derives completely from your fear of them. And if you are able to manage your fear of them, their power goes away to the same degree. And I think that's something we have to keep in mind. Like as afraid as we might be at the beginning, like Bruria just mentioned, it's very normal. We can't get stuck there. And we have to realize that the more we allow ourselves to just wallow in that fear, in that dark place, without trying to move forward, we're actually giving power and fuel to our enemies. And if we're able to somehow not allow that to dominate, then we are taking the control back. There's a story told of the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, was arrested due to trumped up charges of espionage and revolutionary activity, which was basically supporting the Jewish community in Israel. Long story. Anyway, he was in prison in the city of St. Petersburg, and he was being led from one room of the prison to another. And in that walk, as he was walking, he passed by a young boy who had a whip in his hand, and the boy raised the whip as if to try to intimidate the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe gave him a very stern look, and the boy got startled and dropped the whip. This boy actually grew up to become Tsar Nikolai, who was no friend of the Jews. But I think that story is such an important story, because how do you react when somebody tries to bully you? Like Shmuley said, it's just bullying, it's just intimidation. And you have to be able to say, what do you call me? And all of a sudden it's like, ooh, this person's not such a pushover. And even if your heart is pounding like crazy inside, and if you read something online on social media that makes you feel like all you want to do is run under the covers, you have to at least pretend and say, what? No way. And you have to just try to find some courage. The courage that you can muster, the good news is the courage that you can muster actually has a ripple effect, because your friends, people around you see, this is a person with some, they got guts. It gives everybody else around you a little bit more strength. So if you stick your neck out and you make that post, or you make that statement, or you walk around with the kippah or with the chai necklace, or whatever it is, people around you see that and they say, this is a Jew who doesn't hide. Okay, I can do that too. It really has a ripple effect. So again, just to reiterate what Shmuley's point, we should not be hiding, especially the symbols of our faith. I love that point, Shmuley. The symbols of our faith, expressions of our faith in Hashem, are exactly the antidote to everything that's going on here. We are blessed, we are privileged that we can carry and convey faith in Hashem to the entire world. And that's really an awesome privilege, and the ultimate response, the ultimate comeback to what's going on every level, is to not hide at all.
Thank you. We must show them who's boss. Now that we have an idea to cope with anti-Semitism to the best of our abilities, we must ask ourselves, why is Israel under attack? Many of my Jewish friends don't even know and aren't aware of the exact reasoning behind this, but they are still receiving hate. So Shmuley, let me ask you this. People will often say that they're anti-Zionists and not anti-Semites. Can you explain why this is often untrue?
Okay, so just about what we see, first of all, on the social media, and the claims of what's going on, I think there's just a very important point that everybody could ask themselves. I think it's a very valuable tool for those parents who are listening, and for those students, and you could share with your friends. I think there's a very important message about social media. There's so much being put out in social media. So people put out a picture, people put out a post, people put out a story, whatever it is. And we do the same at JYM. We put out a story, we put out a post, and we have a message. You're not involved in a dialogue. It's not education, right? You could let someone know about something, there's an event going on or whatever it may be. But obviously the mediums are being used for all different types of things that everybody's seeing, and especially the youth that are on social media. You know what's different this time than any other time in my life where there's been strife in Israel is there hasn't been social media at the level that there is today. It just didn't exist. And therefore, you went to the news outlets to see what was going on. 2014, I'm not sure what was around. I mean, a little bit of Facebook. Nobody was really interested in it yet. Maybe a little bit. I'm not sure about my timeline exactly, but it wasn't what the world is like today at all. And things have changed dramatically since then. Never mind going back to early 2000s or other time periods. And so I think a tool really that we could use, and the young people could use more, and we could all use it. I could use it myself. Is when you see something, and inevitably you do. You see something in front of your face. Comes up on your feed, comes up in your story, comes up wherever you go. You could ask yourself, why am I seeing this? Why am I seeing this? What does someone want me to see here? And we're in control of that. We don't have to let that in and let that be a message to us. We could filter some of that stuff out. Could we change the platforms? That's a big discussion. I don't know if I could do that today. And I don't know if we could do that on this call, but we could certainly control what we follow, what we see, what we engage with, what bothers us and what doesn't. And that has an effect on ourselves. So it's up to us to control our intake. And we really can. So that's just one point. To the anti-Zionism slash, or is it the same as anti-Semitism, or how does that work? So I just want to, and what's going on here and why is Israel under attack? I can't summarize that in 30 seconds, obviously. That's a big conversation. But the thing to know here is that it's important for us to take the time to ask those questions, and context does matter. Understanding the details makes a difference. What sparked this new event? What is Shimon HaTzadik? What are those homes? Where did they come from? What's this story about eviction? It sounds like they're evicting people from their homes. Not getting into the entire story now. But in short, you can't just look at a post and assume that that's the entire story of Jerusalem. You know, it's funny, when I was studying in Israel for a year, and I went with a friend of mine to visit his grandmother, who they refer to as a Yerushalmi Jew, because she never stepped foot in her life. His grandmother, which would now be over 100 years old, she's passed. She's never stepped foot out of Jerusalem. She's lived in Jerusalem her entire life. And with all her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, her message to them was, if you're going to get married and you want me at your wedding, it needs to be in Jerusalem. And she has a dynasty and an actual documentation of her living, her family, person by person, grandparent by grandparent, over 1,000 years in Jerusalem. So the story is complex. The Jewish connection to Israel didn't start in 1948. In 1948, after the Holocaust, of course, the modern state of Israel began. But the history of the actual modern history goes back to 1876, where those lands were purchased. And then you had the Jordanian control, which we're not going to get into. Again, this is a full history lesson. But my point to everybody is, these instances that spark the battle which we are in now are just sparks. And they're important context to understand. But really, what is going on, and why did that spark all this stuff in Los Angeles, in Toronto, in Chicago, in New York, in around the world? What has that got to do with anything? What has that got to do with 4 people being evicted from their home? So no, it's got nothing to do with that. It's got absolutely nothing to do with that. And if you would go tomorrow and give them their homes back, I stand corrected. If you would not evict them from the homes that are not theirs, just to say for the record, even if we would say, let's do that, even if we would, no, the conflict would not be over with that at all. And so, like I said before, when people chant at a demonstration in support of Palestinian cause, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, I ask myself, I listen to those words, and you need to ask yourself, what does that actually mean? What are they saying? What they're actually saying is they're calling for the annihilation of 6 or 7 million Jews that live in Israel. That's all, they're calling for another Holocaust. That's the way I interpret. I'm just with the words. So you could say that you're not, call it anti-Zionism, call it, and I'm not this, I'm that. That's not acceptable. I think what is acceptable is the conversation around policy and discussion and tolerance. Coexistence, all those things are wonderful, and there's no reason they shouldn't be. There's no reason people shouldn't live together 100%. But the issue of anti-Semitism comes in many, many different forms. And it's very clear when you look at the pictures and you look at the chants and you hear what's going on. So what we need to do in regard to that is really, you have to look past that, and you have to look at what's driving the motives of these people who are so angry. And we have to understand that, unfortunately, the reality today is there are people who would like to intimidate and bring that hate upon the Jewish people. That is nothing to do with Israel, unfortunately. It has nothing to do with the evictions or the lack of evictions of those homes, which sparked this incident.
All right, thank you. So we were talking about the media seeing the put downs on Israel. Moishi, how can a young Jewish person keep a strong connection to Israel while living in a very secular world?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think that it's probably one of the most important questions that we're going to be talking about right now. A lot of other questions sort of are around us and about issues beyond us. This is about how we live our lives. We do live in a secular world. Sometimes it feels that the world is increasingly more and more secular, sometimes aggressively so. And there's always a possibility that will have some effect on us. It will rub off on us. We have to realize, though, a couple of things. Number one, secularism breeds assimilation. In other words, being Jewish is a statement that you make. When you say I'm Jewish, you're saying I'm fundamentally unique. I'm fundamentally different from other people of the world. I'm not like everybody else. We have a different religion, we have a different lifestyle, we have different values, we have different culture. We're fundamentally different. And there's no two ways about it. Not getting into the chosen people who feel that we are racist and superiority complex. That's a whole nother discussion, not for now. But you have to understand, you have to accept that when you acknowledge that you're Jewish, you're basically saying, I am different from most of the world. And we have to be okay with that. You absolutely have to be okay with that. If that's causing you a sense of discomfort or unease, you're going to have to make a choice one way or the other. And the choice is, am I comfortable being unique, or can I not hack it, God forbid, and I have to blend in? You can't have both, is what I'm trying to say. You can't dance, you can't burn the candle on both ends. In the world of fashion, excuse me, the world of fashion, there's a fine line between that which is considered to be weird and that which is considered to be the trendsetter, that, a year or two after it's on the runway, everybody's wearing it, right? The Jewish people are supposed to be, and we are, the moral and spiritual trendsetters of the world, which means to be a trendsetter, you have to do something that's very different from what everybody else around you is doing. It's the same thing as being a creative thinker. It's unconventional. It's not what 99.9% of the world is doing. That's what it means to be Jewish, fundamentally. So to be completely secular and to be Jewish at the same time, it's very hard to sustain. Those are two opposite, orientations. And of course, having a connection to Israel is very much embedded within Judaism. It's embedded within Jewish identity. And it begins before the state of Israel. And so I think they go hand in hand. To answer your question, I think a young Jewish person keeping a strong connection to Israel in a secular world is only possible when a young Jewish person living in a secular world nurtures and strengthens their own Jewish identity through observing mitzvot, through Jewish holidays, through Jewish friendships, particularly your romantic friendships, your choice of a boyfriend or girlfriend, husband and wife. Those are the major kinds of decisions that nurture your Jewish identity. And as a result, organically, there's going to be a strong connection with Israel, identification with the Jews who are in Israel. That's really what it's about. And unfortunately, I think the reverse is also true. I don't want to dwell on that. It's a very depressing thing, but we have to call a spade a spade. Assimilation and adopting a more secular lifestyle is coming at the expense of a person's Jewish identity, and of course, together with that, their connection to Israel. So the best thing we can do is really just increase and increase in our own Jewish identity and practice. And a connection to Israel is going to be a package, part and parcel with that.
Thank you. I totally agree. The world's views are constantly changing and evolving, and everyone knows that the United States and Israel have always been strong allies. What happens if this changes in years to come? Shmuley, can you answer this?
Yeah, sure. And I also want to mention that I see there's lots of questions being posted in the chat. Donnie prepared a bunch of questions through the ones we got through via emails. We'll see if we have time to go through some of the ones in the chat. I think they're fantastic ones, and thank you for posting them, everybody. They're good questions. It's hard to get to everything at once, but I'm going to save the questions, and the ones that we can't get to, we're going to try and move along a little quicker, and then we'll probably, if we don't get to everything today, we could always do a follow-up event. So just to the question of United States, I think that's really a very a good question, and Canada is the same in their support or lack of, and I don't want to get into Canadian politics, but either way, and any nations that are in support of Israel, at the end of the day, I think that for us as Jews, our perspective is strong, and Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai is a song that we've been singing for thousands of years, and stop and close your eyes and sing the song. And this is our nation. Our nation will live on forever. The Jewish people have outlasted all the persecution we've been through. We scream never again after the Holocaust. We will stand strong. We are standing strong. And whether it's something that happens in school, whether it's something that happens on the street, we don't need to embrace and engage in everything. You know, there's a teaching in the Tanya that the Alter Rebbe, one of the founders of the Chabad Hasidic movement, he mentions there about grappling with manure. And when you grapple with manure and you're trying to clean it, yeah, it's very nice, but at the end of the day, you're going to get smelly yourself. So there's sometimes you need to say, this is just not for me. I don't want to engage and I don't want to be in that fight. I don't want to. And sometimes that silence is great, but it shouldn't come from a place of weakness. In relation to the United States or Canada or other supporters of Israel, God is the best that we could rely on. It's never a good thing for any individual person to put their reliance, person or people or nation, to put reliance or faith in people, because people change and nations change and governments change. So I don't really lose any sleep over that, to be perfectly honest. I know that when Israel fought in 1948, spoken to first people who have actually had experience then, there's not enough time to talk about that. They didn't have anything. And God provided for them amazing miracles. So you know what? God willing, our friends will continue to be our friends, but the most important is that Hashem will protect us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. I've seen this firsthand, that someone posts something on their social media platform just because they see it like a celebrity or even a friend post it, and when they're frankly just clueless of the whole conflict. Bruria, how can Jewish people better defend Israel when talking with uninformed people who believe misinformation and false narratives that they see online?
That's a really great question. I've also been dealing with a lot of that in the past 11 days it's been. I'm going to say in the first place, at the beginning, before you even get into answering any of the misinformation, first of all, there's going to be two types of people you're dealing with. There's going to be ones that genuinely just believe this misinformation, and having a conversation with them might actually educate them and bring you progress. And there's going to be people that they don't care if the misinformation is true or not. Their goal is not to spread truth. Their goal is just to hate on Israel. So before you jump in on any discussion or debate, make sure you know who you're talking with and what your goal is over there. But even before that, in the very, very beginning, it's extremely important that you are strong in your beliefs. When you're talking with misinformation, when you're talking with people who want to hate on Israel, you need to be strong in your core beliefs. You need to be absolutely confident to the point that nobody can take your confidence away from you. We have now people saying that Israelis are colonizers. And it feels like a crazy new thing that's just coming up. but it's actually as ancient as it gets. If you know who Rashi is, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, he's an 11th century rabbi. One of the very core rabbis in Judaism that if you're learning Torah, you don't learn it without reading his commentary. He explains everything and guides us through all of our learning of the basics of Judaism. And the very, very first thing you'll learn from him, if you open up a Torah and read the first phrase in the Torah, he has a commentary, asks a question. He says, the Torah is supposed to be a book of laws for Judaism. Why is it starting out with a story? It's supposed to be a book of Jews do this, Jews don't do this. This is how you keep Judaism. But it starts out with a story of God creating the world. And it doesn't just start off with a story. 2 out of 5 books are a story of the creation of the Jewish nation. And his answer, you'll find very, very familiar to today, says, the Torah wants to give you an answer because nations are going to come along and they're going to say to the Jews, you are thieves. You stole that land. It doesn't belong to you. You're thieves. And God wants to start off with telling us very strongly and clearly, God made this world. God made this land belongs to God, and he decides who to give it to, and he decided to give it to the Jewish people. And 2 whole books of the Torah, of the 5 books of Torah, are dedicated to making sure that we are confident, be able to answer people, this is our land. We did not steal it. This was given to us. And that's, you have to, before you're going to engage in any debate, because they're going to gaslight you, they're going to confuse you, they're going to bring you completely made up facts. You need to make sure that your core belief is absolutely very, very strong. Once you have that core belief, there's a lot of great resources out there to educate yourself. There's standwithus.com, has a lot of great resources if you want answers to all your questions and explanations of what's going on. They're also great on social media, and you can read up there. Definitely, if you're able to, go on a birthright trip with Chabad, experience Israel firsthand. Once you see things firsthand, when you see the misinformation, it's easy to see right through it. You know it's not real. You walk through Israel, you know it's not apartheid. You see Israeli soldiers, you get to know Israeli soldiers, you learn that they couldn't hurt a fly. And you start to recognize, you look at pictures people are sharing, saying this is Israel killing people, and you're like, no, that's Syria. Once you have your core belief, your core foundation, you educate yourself, it becomes very, very easy to see through all of these things. But it's very important to have that core belief, because a lot of the misinformation that's being shared right now is really just gaslighting.
I totally agree. So looking from a different perspective, Moishi, how can we expect peace when there are millions of people living a stateless life like the Palestinians?
Yeah, it's a very important question. And I know that for a lot of Jews, we are a nation of people, we are a nation of compassionate people. And this is a question that really puts us in a very difficult spot. We don't feel comfortable denying people full human rights and full freedom, and with the Holocaust and with everything. How do Jews justify oppressing other people and so on? And I want to say something that I think really it's not that radical and controversial. I think it's very simple and straightforward. If we can agree, okay, if we can agree that the most important value of all the values and morals, the most important value to uphold is defending human life. Right? I think that we can all agree that that's the most important thing. That beyond everything else, we have to do everything we can to make sure that people don't die. And I mean people, not just Jewish people, all people. We have to do everything we can to make sure that at the very least, people don't die. We protect the sanctity of life. We protect every single human life that we can. If we take that as the number one value, then that dictates all our policies, and everything flows from there. And if my choice in a given situation becomes, you can either do one of the following. You can either grant somebody complete human rights, or somebody will lose their life. What should you do? Well, we already agreed that the first most important principle, which cannot be violated at the expense of any other principle, is the preservation of human life. very, very sadly and tragically, right now in Israel, this is exactly Israel's choice. Do we grant full freedom and human rights to the Arabs living in territories in Gaza and the West Bank? Or do we deny them some human rights, impose some restrictions, and thereby save lives, both in Israel and, mind you, we save Palestinian lives as well that way. And Israel is making the moral choice. And the world is harassing Israel for making that choice. The world is basically saying, you should really allow everybody full human rights. And if you have to die, so what? At least they'll have human rights. And to us, we say that that's backwards morality. I don't know what you're talking about. And it's not even about a political perspective. It's not about a religious perspective. There's nothing that governs this other than the principle of guarding human life. And until the day comes that we feel comfortable and confident that we can trust that by granting Palestinian Arabs full human rights and freedoms, we will not suffer any loss of life, we have no choice. We have to continue, and I say we have to continue the policy that we have in place, as uncomfortable as it might be, as much as it opens us up for criticism, because the alternative is people die. And if your moral vision doesn't lead to that conclusion, I don't want to hear your hot take. I don't really care about your attitude and perspective. I really don't care what you think. Golda Meir once said it, she said it best. She said, I prefer condemnation to condolences. It's fine. I'll take the condemnation and I'll take my friends and family staying alive. Thank you very much. And it's a very, very clear, absolutely moral choice. I don't lose any sleep over this. I wish it wasn't this way, but I don't get to control that. Because if somebody's trying to kill me, I have to do what I have to do. Until they stop trying to kill us, this is what we need to do. And it's 100% moral. It is 100% the right thing to do. And how can we expect peace? We dream. We hope. Mashiach is our hope for peace. I don't know. I don't know what the mortal expectation of peace would be. But there's no question that the human rights issue, as important as it is comes in second place to human life. And that's that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are living in the 21st century, so the media is obviously going to play a huge role in disputing information and an overall look of things. Shmuley, do you believe there's any chance of Israel having a good image displayed to the media?
So just to pick up, we really need to ask ourselves, and I think this also answers some of the questions that were put in the chat about, our kids in school and how do we respond to that, and whether it's the media or others, right in front of us. So the first thing is we need to get educated, and we need to learn more. We need to learn more. We can't do that all right now on the Zoom. We can answer some questions and give some perspectives, but we really need to learn more, and everybody needs to learn more about the land of Israel, more about Am Yisrael. The more we know, the more education is empowering. And that gives us the ability to know when to engage. The other thing also we have to think to ourselves is, where is that person coming from? What do they want? What are they saying? If they want a discussion and they want answers, well, okay, then there are answers to be found. And that kinds of conversation is very healthy. I've had students call me up many times from their university campuses where their professor would say things and it just boggled their minds. They couldn't believe it was true. And they ran out of class and called me and they texted me, Rabbi, I need to speak to you right now. And their biggest thing was not about, okay, they knew that wasn't true, it was being said, and I was able to pull the sources for them and show them, but now how do they go in and respond? And I would ask them, do you think that you're actually going to have a conversation with that professor or with that other individual? Do you think you could actually have a conversation? Could you bring me into the conversation? Could we have could we look at different perspectives? If the answer is no, and it's just hate, then what are you doing? Why are you engaging? In regard to the media, just directly to your question, and social media, and the hate that is spewed out there, I think it's like this. Look, the bottom line is that, I mean, there's a famous quote, which I just love, and I've heard it years and years and years ago, and I'm just going to say it again. It's one of my favorite ones. I must have heard it when I was 15, and I still remember it. And I apologize for not quoting it from who it's from, but if somebody knows, they could put it in the chat. But there's a famous quote that says, "I don't know the key to success, but the key to failure is trying to please everybody." And you just have to be you. You just have to be strong, and all that noise around you, whether it's media, social media, you have to be you. And who are you? And these types of moments bring us together. They actually bring us together as a Jewish people. The politics in Israel have subsided, thank God, because the nation of Israel comes together. And we in Canada as well, and with all our differences, it doesn't make a difference. We're the Jewish people. And we need to educate ourselves more. We need to learn more. And there is an awakening to learn more, to get more educated. And quite frankly, as our confidence builds, as we know more of who we are, the concern of having to answer and the concern of what they say about me becomes less and less of a concern in my head and in my heart. So whether one day the media will be kind to us, I hope they see the light one day. I hope they see the light of a day where they can be kind to everybody. Everybody, really, everybody deserves that. Everybody deserves kindness. That's their choice. I hate to say it, to be perfectly frank. Sad stories, hate, and aggression fan the flames of the media. A beautiful, wonderful story of love and peace is not a story and doesn't bring everybody back to the television. Let's just be honest, right? So I don't know. I don't want to point a finger. I don't know what their agendas are, but frankly, we have to stop caring. That's my advice.
I totally agree. I think we are very fortunate to have you here, Bruria. To hear it from someone being in the midst of it all, I can only imagine. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, your family, and how life looks like for you in Israel right now?
Thank you. To be honest, for starters, I am really tired. I haven't slept more than like 2 or 3 hours in a row for the past 11 days. So we live in Beersheba, which is in the south of Israel. We have 4 kids. Beersheba is in the south. Thankfully, we're not the worst city. We're not Sderot. We're not Ashkelon. We're Beersheba, which is intense, but not the worst. So I'm going to say that straight out. There are people right now who have it way harder, way harder than what I'm going to describe right now. Also, about 8 months ago, we, thank God, moved to a house that has an in-house bomb shelter. Previously, we did not. And most of my neighbors still do not. So when having an in-house bomb shelter is a huge privilege and really a complete game changer for us. So I'm going to kind of describe what life is now and what it was like also before we had this bomb shelter, which is how it is for most of my friends right now. So it's been 11 days. You get the sirens. We've had so far, the last number I saw, it's gone up since then, but the last number I saw was 220 rockets aimed at Beersheba. Of those 220, most were taken down by the Iron Dome. Some fell in empty spaces. 4 actually fell inside Beersheba in populated areas. All 4 of those times were complete miracles that nobody was injured. Complete miracles. So how it goes is eventually you start to figure out patterns. Hamas likes to bother us the most at supper time, or when we're preparing supper, when we're putting the kids to bed at 1 a.m., at 5 a.m., at 6 a.m. And then about 6:30 a.m., they go to sleep. And we know that's when we can go to sleep and not be disturbed for a few hours. The rest of the time, you're constantly on your toes. Wherever you go, you have to constantly calculate. In Beersheba, we have 60 seconds. In Ashkelon, they have 30. In Sderot, they have 15. In the kibbutzim closer to Gaza, they have sometimes just 7 seconds. And the very close kibbutzim, they don't have any seconds. They get a text, suspicious activity, go to your bomb shelter, and then they just stay there. They've been staying there for 11 days straight. So where I am, you're constantly calculating 60 seconds to shelter. I had to go to a doctor's appointment the entire time. The entire way there is like, okay, if there's a siren now, where do I go? If there's a siren now, where do I go? If you have kids, unless you can keep your kids in the shelter all day, which is a bit hard for them, especially since it's a very tiny room, very, very stuffy, you have to be constantly checking, okay, this kid's in that room, this kid's in that room. If the siren goes off now, my husband's going to grab this kid, I'm going to grab this kid. You are nonstop, constantly calculating every step to make sure what's going to be next. I mean, I've been looking at my watch this whole time because officially there was a ceasefire just as of 2 a.m. So I saw 2 a.m. Okay, maybe I can relax now. We don't really trust ceasefires here. During Protective Edge, there were 11 ceasefires, all broken by Hamas. So it'll be a few days before we actually relax, if nothing happens. Everyone's extremely suspicious, skeptical that the ceasefire is going to mean anything. So we still haven't let our guard down. I don't think I've slept more than 3 hours in a row for a very, very long time. We did get one night where we had no sirens the entire night. We also had another night where we had literally nonstop sirens to the point that it becomes, you don't even know if you're awake or asleep anymore, if the sirens are your dream or what. You just stay in the shelter and fall asleep on top of each other. So we've been really lucky and able to put our kids to sleep in the bomb shelter. We have a bunch of mattresses stuffed together. They are very squished together, but this means that we don't have to wake them up every single time. My older two will sometimes sit up, especially over time, you learn to tell the difference between the different booms. There's a boom that has a big echo that, you know, that means the Iron Dome took it out. And there's a boom that's more of a thud that falls flat and your heart stops and you know that it landed somewhere in the city near you. And often also your whole house or building will shake. And that's when you suddenly start texting all your friends frantically, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? Refreshing all the groups to find out where it hit. So sometimes the most recent one, our kids sat up, 2 older ones, said, what was that sound? And we lied to them and said, oh, that was just the Iron Dome, go back to sleep. And it was actually a direct hit between 3 houses in Beersheba. We were all really praying so hard until we found out that miraculously, despite it taking down an entire wall of a house, nobody was hurt. But it gets to you. When you hear that, it really, really gets to you. And there also, every time there's a siren, you get a bit of adrenaline rush, which you need that adrenaline rush because you need that suddenly energy to get up and think very fast and rush to shelter and grab your kids and close the door. Eventually, the adrenaline rush is exhausting. You get an adrenaline rush 5, 6 times a day, 4 times through the night or nonstop. Your heart just starts to hurt. And it really makes it hard to think straight because you can't do anything thinking I'm going to do this long term. I'm going to focus on this thing now because you know at any minute you're going to be interrupted. If you're cooking anything, you're cooking on a timer, you're cooking something that it's okay if you shut it off at any moment. If you're working on a project, you're not going to get into a flow of working on it. My kids were in the house for 11 days straight. We didn't take them out at all because there was too much rocket fire here. Today they were starting to it was too hard on them. So I thought, okay, there's a park really close by that has a bomb shelter in it. We'll take them there. So my husband came with me. We had a plan. My kids are pretty good about it. Thank God they're not terrified. We talked to them a lot about trusting in God and how lucky we are that we have such an amazing army in the Iron Dome. They don't know about the direct hits. We don't tell them that. We don't tell them that people have been killed. As long as we can, we're going to keep their innocence there. So they just think we're just going to the shelter to be safe. But still today, when we were on the walk to the park, and for about 30 seconds of that, if a siren would have rang, there's no way we would have gotten anywhere in time. And my son says, can we sing Tehillim now? Psalms. So no matter how come they pick it up. Anyways, we got to the park and I realized that the shelter was not as close to the park as I thought. Maybe we would make it in time if there's a siren, but I wasn't sure. So we just stayed for 5 minutes and came home. So we had about a 7-minute total outing of the house at all in the past 11 days. Now for us, our kids can sleep through the night in the shelter, but most of my neighbors don't have that. They're either running to shelters outdoors, or if they live in an apartment, they're running to the bottom of their building where there's a shelter, which means that they're waking up their kids repeatedly through the night to carry them down to shelter. Some shelters are full of mattresses and people sleep in there. They all camp out in there. It doesn't work for every family, especially if you have little kids. It's hard to bring them to sleep somewhere else in a public big bomb shelter. But for these families that don't have a shelter, it is, I can't even begin to describe it. Waking up your kids 5 times through the night, rushing them to shelter, then having to calm them down, put them back to bed repeatedly again. There's something very traumatic about being woken up in the middle of the night and rushed off to a different room. I know that a lot of kids, after a while, I mean, even my kids who sleep in a shelter at night, they're afraid to go to the bathroom because they're afraid of being caught with a siren. My 2-year-old, if she wakes up and sees that I'm not there in the shelter, she panics and screams at me to come down there, which is why I'm talking quietly, because if she wakes up, I'm gonna have to go down in there with them. Kids that live in closer cities, they start having really, really major issues. They regress, like a lot of them start wetting their beds again, even at 12 years old, 14 years old. They don't want to leave their houses anymore. They jump at every sound, every loud sound, every high-pitched sound. I mean, even here, you hear a motorcycle racing down the street, your heart stops because you think it's a siren. So it's difficult. I would say basically that's been our past 11 days, very intense. I don't know if you have any specific questions. I hope I answered that for you.
Thank you. It's absolutely heartbreaking to hear. Sending lots of virtual love and prayers. How do you have the strength and courage to live with your children under constant attack? And what can you tell us living in Canada?
That's a really difficult question. I'd say, first of all, before anything, we absolutely love living in Israel. We absolutely love living in Beersheba. We have an amazing community here. And that helps a big deal. But more than anything, we know that Israel is our land. It's our country. This is our home. This is where we've belonged for so long. My grandparents and great-grandparents for centuries have all just dreamed of living here. And now we're here and they're trying to scare us out, and we can't let them do that. And so we have no choice but to brave through it, because we can't let them scare us out. This is our home and we're going to brave through it, and we're going to stay here no matter what. It does help to have a good group of friends to keep together, to be active, to help out with things, to volunteer with things. That does help a lot. But the main thing is that this is my home and nobody's going to scare me out of it.
Thank you for your honesty and everything that you have shared. But it's now time to figure out, what can we do? What can we do to change the narrative, and where the Palestinians can live in dignity and prosper, and we can live in security as neighbors? Let's start off with Rabbi Goldman. What are your thoughts?
So there's obviously lots of different things that we can do in all kinds of different angles. I want to focus on a more internal angle. There's, the VP of External Affairs and the VP of Internal. I want to focus a little bit on the internal. I think it's very important, no matter your level of religious observance, no matter really how you define yourself as a Jew, I think it's very, very important that every single Jew take time during their week to study some Torah. There are lots of different ways to do this. You don't have to have a great Jewish education. You don't have to have a great knowledge of independent study of the Torah. There are wonderful teachers, resources, and all sorts of tools available. There are podcasts. I have a podcast, shameless plug. It's one of the 6 or 7 podcasts called Parsha Podcast. I know, a great name. A bunch of us took it. But if you're into podcasts, check us out. Last couple of weeks have been a little iffy, but generally it's consistent. Every week there's an episode, about 20 minutes, a lesson on the Parsha, something to think about, and to really to feed your soul. To feed your soul, you need to nurture, just like you nurture your physical health, you have to nurture your spiritual health. A lot of Jews are into yoga. A lot of Jews are into Eastern religions for spiritual nourishment. And it's like a joke. Hello? I mean, God bless you for the exercise, but for the ideas, we have the wealth of spiritual ideas at our fingertips. It's our heritage. It's our own. We don't have to go looking and hunting, somewhere else to find nourishment for our soul and for our spirit. First and foremost, get familiar with your own spiritual heritage. And so I encourage everybody, first and foremost, to arm yourself for all of this, and to strengthen yourself. Make sure that you include in your repertoire of all the activities you do throughout the week, carve out a little bit of time at least to feed yourself some Torah. Go experiment, find a teacher, find a class, find a podcast, find a book, whatever it is. We live in an age of no excuses. Everything's available in English, everything's available online, everything's available for free. There's no excuses. You don't even have to do what the Hillel, the sage in the Talmud, Hillel, who had to pay for admission to the study hall but couldn't afford it, and instead he had to hide himself on the skylight of the study hall and listen in to the lecture. And then when the snow came and covered him up and they saw that something was blocking the sunlight, they came and found him. We don't have to do that anymore. So my first bit of advice is really everybody carve out time to study Torah every week. It strengthens you. It makes you a stronger Jew. It makes you a healthier Jew. And then you're in a better position to take care of other people. Like the old saying goes, first put on your mask, then help everybody else with their mask.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bruria, what are your thoughts? What can we do?
So I mentioned before that we're very lucky we have a bomb shelter in our house. A lot of my neighbors don't. Every time there's a siren, especially at night, when I go into my shelter and close the door, my thought is my neighbors who don't have a shelter and don't have anywhere to go, and they're living in flat one-story homes. All that they can do is huddle up in a corner with their children. You choose the safest corner of your house, which means it has no windows and it's maybe the innermost corner. And they listen to the rockets above and listen to the explosions and the booms and the thuds, and literally just huddle in the corner with their kids praying. And it's absolutely the most traumatic, terrifying experience I remember experiencing myself when we had that situation. And this whole time, especially at nights when we had nonstop sirens, I could only think and worry about all of my neighbors and friends who are in that situation. People aren't aware of this, but a lot of people in Israel don't actually have bomb shelters. 40% of Beersheba residents don't have access to a bomb shelter. My neighborhood is particularly difficult because it's one-story homes, large families. It's a mix. A lot of the homes are poor people that they can't necessarily afford to build their own shelter. One-story homes that were built in the 60s before anyone imagined rocket fire in Beersheba. Absolutely no protection whatsoever. If a rocket falls anywhere within 20 feet of their home, 100 feet of their home, it's extremely dangerous. Very, very traumatic experience. So yesterday, I lost track of time. My friends and I sent up a fundraiser. We want to buy prefab bomb shelters, 2 prefab bomb shelters to put in our neighborhood that will give access to a few families so that at least several families in our neighborhood will have somewhere safe to go and be safe and not have this intense trauma. It's been amazing. Thank God we so far managed to raise enough to buy 1 bomb shelter. We want to protect more people. So I'm asking all of you, if you can please, please, please donate to our fundraiser. I think Rabbi Shmuley just posted the link in the chat. By donating, you will be directly, literally saving lives, and not just saving lives, but it's preventing a huge trauma, helping people, instead of being huddled up in a corner, sitting ducks, terrified, they'll have somewhere safe to go and at least know that if a rocket comes by, they're safe. I mean, we've had in 11 days over 225 rockets in Beersheba, 4 direct hits. And that doesn't count the massive pieces of shrapnel. When the Iron Dome explodes a rocket midair, it doesn't disappear. Huge pieces of shrapnel fall down, and those can also be destructive. So if you donate to this campaign, you're really, really saving lives, and I really appreciate that. That's a huge, huge impact you can make. Thank you.
We'll definitely take a look. Thank you so much. Rabbi Shmuley, what are your thoughts? What can we do?
Okay, so I think really Rabbi Goldman mentioned about the idea of Torah study, which I think is so important, and hope everybody really takes that seriously. And Bruria talked about tzedakah, about helping, and there's no better place than to help our brothers and sisters in Israel right now. So anybody who could, of course, that's beautiful. You share it with your friends. I put it in the chat. And I'm just going to talk about one last thing, and that is mitzvahs. I had an idea, and I just want to put it out here. If anybody's interested in participating in something like this, they could reach out to me later and we could work on it. But as Rabbi Moshe said before, that what's happening on the ground is a reflection of a spiritual reality. This is true. We believe this as Jewish people. Everything that happens on the ground in a material world is a reflection of spiritual interactions. Our bodies and our souls is how we operate. And then there's the godly energy and soul, which is in the entire universe and everything that's going on in the world. So if there's strife and conflict and evil and death and rockets flying, that means that the forces of evil are hard at work and they're succeeding in some form or another. Let's hopefully hope not much and no death on any side. We just want life and love and peace and goodness for everybody. So the Rebbe has taught us that those who need to be in the battle and those who need to be on the ground, they need to do their work. But we could do something. We really can. And I had an idea. It's just something that came to me this afternoon, and I wanted to share it with anybody here. And if anybody thinks it's something we could work on together, I had an idea of building a website which has sort of a scale. On one side, we could have the list of rockets or deaths or however we would represent, for all the evil coming in and the difficulty of what's going on in the world materially, at least in relation to the Jewish people in Israel. And on the other side, we can build a system that represents countering each one of those rockets with an act of kindness, an act of goodness, a mitzvah, helping somebody. And this could be for Jewish people, non-Jewish people alike, bringing more spirituality and positivity into the world and tipping that scale that evil is not winning, spirituality and goodness is winning. And I want to go back to what Bruria said in the very beginning, where anxiety and fear really overtook her. And something I take from this meeting today, I'll just say, is that when you take action and you engage and you help others and you volunteer, and like in her story where she was helping those soldiers and helping others in need, for us, the same story, whether it's a donation to help people in Israel, whether it's doing another mitzvah and becoming a stronger and more educated Jewish person and part of the Jewish nation, take action. Action doesn't mean we're part of the IDF. It doesn't mean we're going to do the Israeli government and the powers that need to deal with whatever they need to deal with. Well, hopefully God should help them to make the right decisions and do the best that they could do. But we could do our part as a Jewish nation, and we need to do our part. So I encourage everybody and anyone who wants to participate either on an organizational level or on a practical level there's 4,000 rockets hitting Israel. Let's have 4,000 Jews and non-Jews alike in Thornhill, in the Greater Toronto area, in other areas, participate in thousands and thousands of acts of kindness and spiritual actions of a mitzvah, of helping another person to counter the evil forces that are out there. That's my recommendation of action.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Shmuley.
before we wrap it up, I think Dani, are we wrapping it up for this evening, but I believe, correct?
Yes, doesn't Owen have a final question?
Yes. Owen has a final question. Where's Owen? Owen, let's bring in Owen. Hang on a second. There he is. Owen, go ahead, Owen.
Yes, Rabbi Shmuley. There's been a debate going around Thornhill and Waterloo about which rabbi is superior between Rabbi Shmuley yourself and Rabbi Moishi. They're almost calling it like a Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan situation. So could you two maybe kind of inform on who's Scottie Pippen, who's Michael Jordan?
Who's the best rabbi? Just I love the light. I know Owen asked us to ask a question at the end to finish it off. Owen is a alumni of JYN, and now he's moved over to Rabbi Moishi and participated in Chabad. But I want to tell you, Owen, you're a great example of someone who's been amazingly active as a youngster in high school, and you went to university, which Dani, you're doing next year to Western, and you jumped right into Chabad and come to Shabbat dinners and put on tefillin and help out with all the situations there. I think that's the answer. The answer is jumping in, and this is I hate to say it, but this is making us stronger. It is making us stronger, and I feel it. I sense it. The messages I'm getting from everybody. So I want to wrap up with saying a huge thank you to Bruya. Be safe, and your family. Please let us know if there's any way we can help. A huge thank you, shout out to Dani. Great host, and thank you for walking us through everything here. And Rabbi Moishi, it's always great to be together. I'm sorry I kept everybody on mute, not because I don't want to hear from everybody, but it's the only way to sort of have a productive conversation, but we'll have many more. I'm going to save the chat and questions, and feel free to reach out, and we'll continue the conversation. Again, Sanchia, thank you so much, Sanchia Rabin, for pushing me to make this event, and God willing, many more in the future. All the best, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bura. Good night. Good Shabbos.
Night. Good Shabbos. Just if anybody would like to stay in touch, I know it's old fashioned, but you can follow me on Facebook where I share updates of what's going on here. I'm not on TikTok, sorry. But if you'd like to stay in touch, you can find me on Facebook, Bruya Efyun. And thank you so much to everyone who's donated to buy the bomb shelters. I'm just so happy that we're going to be able to do this for our neighbors and friends. Thank you.
Maria, thanks for sharing your story, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you.